Hey there, welcome back. I'm Amanda with the Happy Homestead. It is 5:15 on a Monday night. It's normal life. You're gonna hear my children in the background. This is it. But I really wanted to take you on a three homestead dinners. I have been doing this a little bit back in the winter and in the spring. We're in the throes of summer where the garden is just producing and things are coming out. And I wanted to show you 3 homestead summer dinners that maybe give you some inspiration at your house. So tonight we are having a garden salad with a lot of the vegetables from the garden, topped with some pan-seared salmon and some Greek lemon vinaigrette dressing that we made in a previous video. So I've got a lot of the salad stuff behind me. The salmon is ready to be prepped. I'm just gonna put some salt and pepper on that, maybe some dill and maybe garlic powder. And I'm gonna pan sear that and then put the salads together on the plates. Okay, so while the oil is heating up in the pan, I wanted to show you what I've got. So I've got 2 cucumbers here. I've got our dressing that we made this morning. I've got some feta cheese that was left in the fridge. These are all some tomatoes and some green beans that I picked today in the garden, so we'll use a variety of those. I've got some chard in here that is already clean that I had gotten from the garden. But I went out about an hour ago and got some more beautiful Swiss chard. So I actually need to strip that from the stem and clean it in my salad spinner. And then we have our fermented lemon sauerkraut. So I'm just gonna start getting the rest of this chard cleaned up. Bon appetit. Salmon salad dinner. It is now 5:40. So what did that take? 25 minutes? Yeah, not long at all, right? I already had the salmon thawing in the refrigerator. Already had the vegetables somewhat cleaned and just ready to be chopped, but all I did was pan sear it in some olive oil on medium to medium high heat. And then once I flipped it when that top got nice and crusty. And then I flipped it, put a lid on it, help retain that moisture, and turned it down to medium low until it's cooked to your liking. All right, night one of our summer homestead dinners is complete. I'll see you next time. Welcome back to the second night of our summer homestead dinner series. I've got a bunch of things behind me from the garden. It's going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge meal tonight, utilizing some things we have in the refrigerator, some things from the garden, and just kind of putting it together. These are some of my favorite kinds of meals because it just allows for a little bit more creativity, but also for me, it feels like it's just so much more productive with cleaning the refrigerator out. So let me show you what I've got. So before I even go into everything I have, it is 5:13 on a Sunday night. My husband is over here, my children are upstairs, and so it's gonna be a little chaotic at some point. I'm gonna try to edit that out as much as I can, but this is our real life. So I have these beautiful Italian variety of patty pan squash. They're pretty big. They're this white kind of heirloom type patty pan. I've got a little baby one here. One little lone pepper, sweet pepper, some onions, garlic, tomatoes, so all of that from the garden, as well as some Swiss chard that we left over from last time when we had our salad. I've even got some homemade sage derby cheese here. This is all that's left of the sage derby that I had made, so we're going to use that tonight. And then in here is just about 1 pound of Italian sausage. So this is part of the ground pork we had purchased from our pig last year. I had gone ahead and made some of it into Italian sausage and then repackaged it up. And this is our last package of that. So I'm basically going to be stuffing the squash. We're going to have Italian sausage stuffed squash with some of the other veggies and cheese, and it's going to be delicious. So I'm going to first start with opening these up, scooping out the seeds, and they are going to bake in the casserole pan. I have about 1/4 inch of water in this pan, and then we're just going to put the squash in open side up. I'm just going to use a melon baller to scoop out some of the pea seeds and the kind of stringy pulp part. And that's also where the sausage mixture will go. So you can do this with zucchini or yellow squash, especially the zucchini that, you know, sometimes get away from you in your garden and they're like as long as your arm. It happens quite easily. So it's really good, like a zucchini boat or a yellow squash boat. You can easily do that too. Okay, so our squash is ready. I am gonna start chopping before I empty the sausage into my bowl. I'm just gonna start chopping some of the other items here. I'm gonna roughly chop these tomatoes. The first thing I'm gonna do is just break up my cheese a little bit because this is a lot harder, so it can withstand me kind of crumbling it with my hands better than, like, say, the tomatoes. I will stir that in a little bit. But I'm just crumbling my cheese here. Now, again, I am using a cheese that I have that needs to be used. So mozzarella would be good, some Parmesan cheese, maybe an Asiago, a Romano. This is kind of an Italian dish, so an Italian cheese makes sense. Maybe you have slices of provolone that you could actually put on top. Okay, and now I'm going to start adding everything else. I'm going to start with the onions, garlic, and peppers.
Looks amazing, honey.
Thank you.
I love how you use all the vegetables from our garden. It's beautiful.
This is the man behind the camera, y'all.
Just keeping the dream alive.
Yep. What dream is that?
Everything. Anything and everything you want.
Well, thank you.
I'm just a breadwinner.
You look really short right now.
Yeah. As we get older, our bodies go through dehydration. And we shrink.
Okay. Well, thank you for your contributions.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to finish making dinner now.
Okay. Squeeze that thing. Act like you're angry with the kids or something.
All right, so I added the tomatoes. I think we're good. I don't need to add any salt or pepper or any herbs, right? Because the sausage already had...
Throw a little garlic in there.
There's garlic in there. So, because it already had the seasoning. So I'm just going to start stuffing the squash. And remember, I put about 1/4 inch of water in the pan underneath the squash, so that they actually help cook too. The water becomes almost like a steaming agent to help cook the patty pan. Okay, so I've got all of the squash stuffed. I'm just gonna clean up the counter. I am just turned the oven on to 400. So I'm gonna bake these in the oven at 400 for approximately 25 to 35 minutes. I'll just check to make sure everything is cooked through. You want the patty pan really soft, like to pierce through with a fork. I'm also gonna cover this with some aluminum foil while I'm cooking, and then I'll take that off probably around the last 10 minutes and maybe sprinkle some Parmesan cheese on as well. So I put the pan in the oven. I set the timer for 25 minutes to start. And then at that 25-minute mark, I'll probably take the foil off, like I said, and just check it and have it go for maybe another 10 minutes. So we are also going to have some lemon dill sauerkraut, fermented sauerkraut that's in our refrigerator. We're gonna add that in. Adding fermented foods to any of your meals just adds a whole nother level of health and probiotics and nutrition to your body. So highly recommend starting to ferment some of your own foods, as well as introducing and incorporating them into your diet. So we're gonna have some of that. All right, and I have all of this beautiful Swiss chard from the garden. I've got 4 of these smaller blush onions from our garden that I harvested a few months ago. So I'm gonna chop them up. I've got 5 potatoes, just yellow Yukon Gold potatoes. I did not grow these. These are from the store. And maybe some garlic. And so what I think I'm gonna do is just start with sauteing the onions and the potatoes on the stove, get the potatoes nice and crispy, nice and cooked through. And then I will add the chard, put the lid on and help steam that down, and it's kind of like the potato chard dish. Add some salt, pepper, and it will be delicious. So I'm just gonna start with chopping the onions and the potatoes and getting them on the skillet. So the timer went off, and I just took the aluminum foil off and set the timer again for about 15 minutes. In the meantime, I added some green beans that I'd found in the garden as well. Not many, but I thought I'd add them in. I also did a splash of red wine vinegar. A little bit for taste, but also just to help with deglazing the pan here and get all of that beautiful flavor in those brown bits. I do believe the potatoes are probably pretty cooked through. So I'm just gonna start adding in some of the chard to start to get that wilted down. And then I'll put the top back on. Don't be surprised by when you see how much this wilts down too. So you can see how well that's wilted down. I'm just going to start stirring it up. Actually, I'm going to salt and pepper the chard a little bit. Redmond real salt. And I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to take it off the burner though, because this is just about done. And I don't want anything to really start sticking to the pan. So this is done, heat is off, I'm just gonna move it aside. So I ended up putting some tomato sauce on because I thought that would just make it even better. I'm just gonna sprinkle some Parm cheese. I ended up cooking it for about 45 minutes total. Dinner is ready. Bon appetit. Welcome back to the third meal in our summer homestead series. I have some Italian sausage cooking on the cast iron skillet on the stove because tonight I'm going to make an Italian sausage and kale lasagna. Now tonight's dinner is going to be a little bit different than the two previous summer homestead meals, and that is because I'm not actively pulling anything from the garden for tonight's meal. However, I'm using things that were preserved from last year's garden. Still counts, right? So let me show you what we're putting in the lasagna because it's going to be a little bit different than a typical lasagna. So I have kale. This is kale that we grew last winter. So I probably, April. There you go. I froze it in April. So we grow kale usually in our garden all winter long, and it's a really great healthy green just to have at our back steps. And so I usually, whatever's left over before I need to get the spring garden planted, I harvest and then I freeze it. So I'm going to kind of like wring this out, get any extra moisture out, and then sprinkle it within the lasagna. I have dehydrated tomato slices. Now I did this, I think last year in the Every Bit Counts challenge with just some of the last tomatoes of the year. And so they smell amazing. I have 2 jars of these left. So I'm just using hopefully all of this jar tonight. They're really great like snacking chips too, by the way. But I'm gonna layer these in with my lasagna also. I have some ricotta cheese, still pretty frozen, so I don't know if I'll get to use this, but I made this last fall, I believe, and it's in our freezer. It's the last of the ricotta, it needs to be used. And then this I just made like 2 weeks ago. This is a herbed kefir cheese, and so we make and ferment our own kefir, which is basically the dairy version of kombucha. It doesn't use a SCOBY per se, right? But kefir grains, you ferment the milk and it becomes this kefir. And if you let it go really long, it separates almost as if you think it's bad, like it's curdled. But you can then strain it through a cheesecloth and it becomes this thick, beautiful cheese, almost like a cream cheese. And so I put salt, pepper, garlic, onion, basil, and oregano in here, and it's amazing. So you can do it like an herb spread or like a dip, but we're gonna put this in our lasagna. I have some lasagna noodles that I had in our pantry. I got 1 box that's opened left. I'm just gonna use that up. The difference though tonight is that I'm gonna make a bechamel sauce. I hope I said that right. It's an Italian white sauce. So instead of like a marinara, I'm going to be using a white sauce in our lasagna. If you know how to make a roux, which is what butter and flour whisked together, and then you very slowly, while whisking, drizzle in your stock or your bone broth, that's how you make a roux. It's the same exact process, except you are whisking in milk. And we've got plenty of milk, so that's what I'm gonna make tonight. And then I'll use that for the sauce. I'll probably add some Parmesan cheese, a little salt, a little pepper, maybe a little nutmeg, maybe a little garlic powder, just to give it a little bit more flavor as well. And so I am gonna take that off the stove. The sausage is done. I need to make my bechamel sauce, and then I can start layering my lasagna. Okay, I'm only making a small 8x8 lasagna because there's only 3 of us eating tonight. So I still do leftovers for my kids for their school lunches, but even the 8x8 will be plenty. So I just put about 2 tablespoons of butter in there to melt. I'm gonna put 2 tablespoons of flour in, and then I'm gonna slowly start drizzling in some milk. I don't need probably more than about 2 cups of the sauce, and it will thicken a little bit. Now again, if you've never made a roux, this is exactly how you do it. You would just substitute bone broth for the milk. And it's just a great way to thicken up sauces. This is what I would use to thicken up like a chicken pot pie type of thing, right? If I had like chicken soup that I had canned and then I wanted to thicken it for a chicken pot pie, this is exactly what I would do. So the butter's melted. Got our flour, and the flour is going to start soaking up the butter. This is exactly what you would want and expect to see. And I have this on medium heat. I might need to bring my heat up a little bit to about a 7. Okay, so I'm now going to start whisking in my milk. And guys, if this looks a little weird, this milk, it's because this is yogurt that didn't fully culture correctly. So I'm just not letting it go to waste. So you'll notice that whatever liquid you put in, whether it be the milk or the stock, it's going to start really thickening, right? And you're almost going to start to see those clumps again that you just had when it was just the flour and butter. It's like it's almost like paste, right? That's when you know it's time to start adding in more liquid. And you just keep adding until you get the desired thickness and the desired amount that you want. This is probably going to be it for the amount of milk I do. Now it's just going to be about getting it to the right consistency. I'm going to start adding just a little salt, some Parmesan cheese. Now, if you're making a roux, you're not adding this stuff, right? Ideally, your bone broth is already salted. You don't really add herbs to a roux. This is just particular to this type of sauce. I turned my heat down to low because my sauce is pretty cooked. I'm just going to let it cool a little bit. Okay, I have my little assembly line here. I'm just going to take my casserole dish over to the stove and put a little bit of my white sauce on the bottom so I can start my layers. Just enough to coat it so the noodles don't stick. I do this same exact process even if it was a marinara red sauce. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna layer in some sausage. Now I know that there are like tried and true techniques on how to proper layer a lasagna. And if that is what you're looking for, this is not it. I just want to be very clear. This is all about getting dinner on the table with it being delicious and nutritious. That is always my goal. Sometimes I go the extra mile to make it pretty. Maybe not today. I'm gonna do some tomatoes. Okay, some of my kefir cheese. Okay, so I am going to cook this for probably about an hour at 350, and I'm going to put foil on. The lasagna is done. I've already taken a peek at it, and it looks and smells so good. It looks really good. I'm really glad that I did a white sauce, right, rather than the traditional marinara. Just something a little different. So it is not quite time for dinner. We just have a hectic night tonight. That's why I wanted to make that ASAP. But that concludes our 3 garden homestead summer dinners. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Stay healthy, stay well. Bye-bye.